This is David Nevins for Citybiz List. Welcome to our program today. And you're joining us for a series of conversations on behalf of the Bridge Alliance that we're calling Repairing America's Broken Democracy. So we have a little bit of work ahead of us. And for those of you interested in the Bridge Alliance, and if you were to go to their website, you would find an early sentence that says, what's the goal of the organization of the Bridge Alliance? Well, it's to attempt to fix the dysfunctional and suffocating partisanship of our current political system. So quite a challenge ahead of us. And our guest today, I'm pleased to say, is David Eisner, who is the CEO of an organization called Convergence. And David joins us from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. David, welcome to our program on Citybiz List.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Great. So, David, you have a very successful, decades-long career in business and civics and government. Tell us a little bit about that, about yourself, and what is Convergence and what you hope to be accomplishing along the lines of the introduction that I gave you.
Sure. Well, starting backwards, Convergence is an organization that really sits at the intersection between, on the one hand, bringing people together across really deep divides, and on the other hand, problem solving. We focus on intractable issues that are stuck because of the kind of partisan gridlock that you're talking about. And we bring the interests together from multiple sides to build trust, and over a very intense period that lasts many months, ultimately identify consensus solutions that can be brought both to the private sector and to government for policy change and practice change. And I came to this from, as you suggest, a longer career than I'd like to admit, working mostly in the business sector, working with AOL and Time Warner, focused on communications and helped build the AOL Foundation. And through that, really discovered the importance both of building community and of the power of individual citizens coming together to accomplish important pieces of work. I had the privilege to go into government under George W. Bush and to run AmeriCorps and America's National Service portfolio. And there, I took another step deeper into understanding that when people come together to solve a challenge, they bring a kind of idealism that is very, very powerful and can make enormous change. And I also discovered the power of how people can come together across vast differences. And we learned this in service. The folks most to the right believe in the power of volunteering. The folks most to the left strongly believe in addressing urgent challenges in their community. And you can see them every day working side by side in food pantries, soup kitchens, helping deal with domestic violence and other really challenging issues. And so this opportunity with Convergence to think really intentionally about what it takes to bring people together with that same idea of finding important solutions. And because we're all looking at how to solve a challenge, find a way to build trust in each other, that solving that challenge is foremost in our mind.
So what you call convergence, I think you're probably referring to the general public, but tell us, again, be a little more specific about the work of your organization. Sure. and what you hope to accomplish and how you're going about it, David.
We actually do work closely with members of Congress. And when you look at groups like the Bipartisan Working Group in the House or the Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress or the Problem Solvers Caucus. These are members that are dedicated to finding ways to work together. And they're not all centrists. They're folks that understand from both parties, even coming from more strong partisan spaces. They understand that how important it is to be able to relate to their colleagues. It becomes an enormous challenge. We do see that a lot of votes are party line. I think we have an opportunity with the razor thin margins that we're looking at now in both the House and the Senate to find more opportunities for bipartisanship. And if we can move past some of the real crisis that happened on January 6th, that interposed higher levels of distrust on Capitol Hill as well as elsewhere. Moving past that is important. And we do think that there's a clamor in the country for people to come together to get their work done. And we believe Congress is hearing that. The way that Convergence specifically operates is we look at an issue that's stuck, usually on Capitol Hill, something like federal budget reform. It's been so difficult for Congress to pass their budgets in time. And a lot of folks understand that reforming the process was critical, but we couldn't reach any kind of agreement between the parties and between sectors on which pieces of reform were more important. So over the course of a year, Convergence brought together the leading interest groups that Congress listens to, and that were diametrically opposed on these reforms. And over the course of the year, they learned from each other what principles they were basing decisions on. They learned to trust each other, that they really weren't striving for partisan advantage, that they were simply bringing different perspectives about how to solve the problem. And once they built that trust, they were able to identify consensus solutions that they could propose to Congress. And what we just saw, this happened a couple of years ago, and what we just saw in the Congress was that the Select Committee on the Modernization of Congress voted on reform for federal budget unanimously, and moved those proposals and recommendations into the House, into legislative vehicles.
Well, let's hope it continues to move forward. Switching gears a little bit, David, I understand that your organization has a significant project dealing with our economic recovery.
We do. We know that in 2008 and 2009, the Great Recession, we ended up in a situation where, although we addressed certain short-term problems, we never really got to the point where we brought all of the folks who lost their jobs and suffered economic dislocation from the Great Recession into back into the workforce. And that created some problems that we're still dealing with, from the opioid epidemic to a lot of skepticism and a sense of being left behind in a lot of rural America. With a lot of people off the rolls, feeling like they're being hurt by everything from technology to globalism to immigration, and that has given us some of the problems that we have today with polarization. We know that we can't afford to have the parties trading back and forth their proposals for fixing this problem and not actually accomplishing what we need to accomplish, which is bringing people back into the workforce. And so for the last 6 months, we've been bringing leaders from the corporate community, from think tanks, together with folks representing workers and representing communities, and we're beginning to build some pathways to strengthen the opportunity of dislocated workers to end up in productive jobs that offer them economic mobility.
Good for you. And I understand another such project is on gun violence and suicide prevention.
We're exploring that as well. And as you know, there are there's a tremendous spectrum of positions on any issue relating to guns. And we're extremely hopeful. This is a relatively new project. We're extremely hopeful that even folks who are not used to speaking with each other and who potentially believe that the others, that folks that differ from their perspectives are really skeptical or out to get them, that they'll be able to come together with a deep understanding that preventing gun-related suicides is critical. And we know that gun-related suicides account for over 60% of all gun-related deaths in the United States. And we know that gun-related suicides account for about 50% of all suicides in the United States. So coming together to make that, to prevent gun-related suicide feels like a really important step forward. And we're really delighted at the goodwill and the willingness to move past skepticism that all the participants in the dialogue are showing.
I couldn't agree more. So let me first say that. But we've had a few of these conversations with leaders such as yourself, and they all really have a common thread, a common bond. And that is the need for us to have more conversation. Right. In some cases, intense conversation, not just talking, but listening, to those who we disagree with. And it just seems to me we used to be there. We're further away from that today. I know that, if you were just talking about the recent presidential election, I know that, many conversations are probably started off by saying, I assume there's nothing that I can say to you that will convince you, blah, 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 blah. And that could be either side, right? One to the
Right.
other. It makes no difference. So how tell me about some of the successes you're having and how you're going about it, because it just does seem that we become so polarized, and converging, if you will, great, again, name for your organization, Convergence, would go a long way toward fixing our situation here.
David, you're so right. Today I just read a statistic that astounded me, which is in 1960, when Americans were asked, would it matter to you if your child married someone from the opposite party? Only 4% said that they would be upset about that. And today it's about 50% of Americans would actually be upset if their child married somebody from the other party. So we are looking at a really changed environment that over decades has our ability to trust each other, to converse with each other, to understand each other has eroded. And I don't know about you, but when I speak to people about what they think of as the other side, and most recently that's been in the context of the presidential election.
Right.
The word that I hear most often is fathom, as in I just can't fathom what they are thinking.
Right.
And I think that Convergence sits as part of a field that is actually much broader. There is a very large field that's fundamentally devoted to bringing people together. Convergence does it among leaders, and we do it for the purpose of solving problems. Other organizations do it at a grassroots level, bring people together for social cohesion so that people can live next to each other as neighbors or to solve local problems. Others do it, bring people together for the purpose of rebuilding trust in institutions. But regardless how it happens, there are certain best practices that we know. And one of the most important is to recognize that we're not coming together for the purpose of compromise. Compromise is important. Ultimately, it's how good decisions get made. But when we're bridging these kinds of divides, the most important thing is to listen and understand each other and not worry that this engagement may somehow push on my values or may somehow cause me to change a very important position that I might have on an issue. And we see that the work of building trust, of recognizing each other's fundamental humanity, of actually experiencing that people that we meet don't bring sort of menacing intentions to the discussion, regardless of how much we may disagree with them. And we think it's an enormous step forward to transition people from being enemies to being opponents. And one of the things that we at Convergence like to speak of is our unlikely allies, people who come together for the purpose of thinking about an issue where they may have diametrically opposed perspectives, but they trust the other person to be genuinely trying to solve the same problem that they're genuinely trying to solve.
Well, you again, I couldn't agree more. You make it sound so simple. I love the line you used about turning enemies into opponents. That, when you're talking, politics and issues like that, we're all Americans in this case, right? And so we shouldn't be enemies. We can be political opponents, as you noted. And then I love the stat you gave of, I think you said 50 plus years ago, 4% of folks would be hesitant to marry, not outside their religion, outside their political persuasion. And today it's 50%. I would only say I would have guessed it even to be higher today than 50%. That speaks to the divide that we're suffering from, for sure.
It really does. And it's one of the unique challenges around bridge building is that sometimes it can sound, it can sound like it's a kumbaya notion, or it can sound like it's really fuzzy, and it's not sort of evidence-based or research-based. But we know from brain science, from a lot of studies about how tribalism enters into political discourse, that there really are evidence-based programmatic interventions that work. I can tell you that for 10 years plus, Convergence has very consistently, with every one of our dialogues, succeeded in bringing these folks who really didn't trust each other at the front end and who were very skeptical about coming into dialogue. We've succeeded each time in building that trust and in engaging them together and finding common solutions. And to me, that signals that people need to accept that there's methodologies here that work. There's methodologies that are reliable, that it's not fatuous or somehow impossible. We actually know that we can do it, and we rely a lot on other adjacent communities. There's an awful lot of work happening around violence prevention internationally that works, and that's being invested in by the world and by communities. We know that there are really powerful frameworks for building corporate teamwork, even among folks who may be competing for resources. And there's no reason to believe that we can't scale and grow these kinds of programs to be effective.
Agreed again. David, tell our audience how they can learn more about Convergence and become involved if they're so inclined.
Thank you. Please, anyone that's interested in bridging these divides, in finding common solutions to problems, go to convergencepolicy.org. That's the website for Convergence. It's convergencepolicy.org.
That's great. And I'm sure that many of our viewers will indeed do that. So, David, thank you very much for participating today. We've been talking to David Eisner of Convergence on behalf of the Bridge Alliance, and our series is called Repairing America's Broken Democracy. David, you're very much helping to do that. So thank you very much, and good luck going forward. It's been great to have you.
Thanks to you, David, and to the Bridge Alliance.
Thank you.